What's happening, y'all? Welcome inside the Fantasy Stock Exchange. Danny and Bush coming at you to break down the number one draft strategy for those of you guys that pick in the top four of your draft. So if you guys pick number one, number two, number three, or number four in your fantasy draft, maybe you already know where you're drafting from, this is the video for you. We're going to break down some of the strategies that you can employ at these top end picks in the first round based on all the experience that me and Danny have had, drafting like 100 underdog teams this summer and also doing a bunch of mock drafts for our home leagues and all that kind of stuff as well. So at the end, we're going to do two sets of mock drafts. So we're going to do one mock draft where I'm picking from one, you're picking from four, and we're going to do an 8-round mock draft breaking down the early rounds. And then we're going to do another one at the end, 2 and 3, and kind of close out how we're breaking down the positional tiers and all that kind of stuff that goes along with picking early in your draft. So again, this is the number one strategy guide that you guys can watch if you pick 1 to 4 in your fantasy drafts. Danny, how you doing today?
Doing well. And yeah, if you guys watched this series last year, we actually did this last year as well. You guys seem to really enjoy it. Obviously, we're going to be doing these strategy videos for picks 1 to 4, picks 5 to 8, and picks 9 to 12 in the oncoming days. And as Corey kind of said, we'll do our best to outline our thought process behind each of those picks, the structural drafting aspect of, well, we're at this turn, what can we kind of expect going into the next turn? And ultimately, as we've said multiple times, how we want to build these teams out from the ground up. But yeah, I'm ready to roll. We're going to be talking obviously the specifics of these draft slots, because as much as people want to say, oh, you just want to collect the best talent on your team, each draft slot is going to give you access to different types of builds that will be optimally the best for your team. So I'm ready to roll. I'm excited to get through this. And yeah, before we get into it, as always, we're going to hit the intro.
Right. So as Danny said before the intro, last year when we did this video, we determined that going into the draft last year, there was a consensus like Christian McCaffrey, Alvin Kamara, Dalvin Cook type of tier at the top of the draft at running back. And we determined that Hero RB was the best strategy to employ from those picks based on all the experience we had last summer. This year, it's a little bit different. And it depends specifically what pick within the top four that you actually have. So we're going to break down which draft strategy we think is ideal with the huge disclaimer that we're only doing this before the draft. Once we actually get into the draft and the bullets are flying, you got to stay fluid depending on what's available on the board, because you don't want to go into a draft thinking, hey, Hero RB might be the play that I go with, and then Saquon Barkley slides to the 2-3 turn. Then obviously you go with a double hero type of approach, etc. So we're going to start with picks 1 to 2. Picks 1 and 2 are universally known, I think, as the best places to draft from this year. I believe they're the best places to draft from. If you pick 1 or 2, the draft strategy is pretty simple. The most viable strategy is to do Hero RB, or at least start with Hero RB with that intent going into the first round. We broke it down in a full video what Hero RB exactly means. So if you guys don't know what I'm talking about, check out the link down below. It will tell you exactly what you need to know about the hero and double Hero RB strategies. But basically what this means is you take an anchor running back, and in this case, Jonathan Taylor and Christian McCaffrey at picks 1 and 2. And then during the RB dead zone rounds 3 to 7, you hammer out wide receivers. Maybe you grab an elite quarterback or an elite tight end, and you avoid that RB dead zone from rounds 3 to 7. And then you take your later round shots on running back, rounds 8, 9, 10, and so forth. And then you also work the waivers for your running back 2 slot throughout the season.
Yeah, for sure. That first round, set it and forget it. Get that elite RB1 in your slot. We're both high. I have Christian McCaffrey as my 1, Jonathan Taylor as my 2, Corey vice versa. So either of those running backs should be locked and loaded anchors, faces of your franchise going into the year. And once you get past that first round, that 2-3 turn, 4-5 turn, etc., that's where you have to be fluid, as Corey was mentioning. You have to be water, because while based on the experience that we've done, you should have access to some elite wide receivers, while some of the running backs, specifically in more home leagues drafts, a lot of the running backs are going to be flying off the board. So for the most part, if you're, past the Barkley, Javonte, Aaron Jones, Leonard Fournette tier, because we're expecting to be off the board, you're eyeing receivers like T. Higgins, Deebo Samuel, Tyreek Hill, Mike Evans, etc. there. So from our own experience, if that's the wide receiver landscape and the running back landscape is past the guys I just mentioned, we love double tapping that wide receiver position. So whether you want to, tap into AJ Brown and T. Higgins, Deebo Samuel and Mike Evans, or maybe mixing in one of those elite tight ends in that build, that 2-3 turn is where we've liked the majority of our teams once we select that type of player. And then, of course, as you guys will see with the mock draft exercise, the board can very well open up to you past those first 3 rounds.
Yeah, and another thing too, once you get to that 4-5 turn, you're usually not in the Cam Akers, Travis Etienne, Brees Hall type of area, whatever of those archetypes we talked about as the running backs that you can deviate in the dead zone from. They're usually not on the board at the 4-5 turn. Akers usually goes in the mid fourth round. Etienne usually goes around the 3-4 turn. Maybe you want to take a stab at a guy like J.K. Dobbins, but for the most part, you're going to avoid most of the running backs in the dead zone because the archetypes that we are going to deviate for are usually not on the board.
Yep. And the one thing I want to reiterate, we've talked about a lot on our channel before, but if you guys are a new viewer to this video, we expect this to pop off. You want to target, again, the caveats, the disclaimers, the running backs that you can mix into these teams. You want to target guys that can not only beat their ADP, but have a chance to be top 5, top 2 round selected players this time next year. So instead of gearing towards your David Montgomery types, your Ezekiel Elliott types, guys like that, where you'll hear some other podcasts say, well, you set it and forget it, he's your RB2 for the year. You're more so looking at the guys that can smash their ADP. So your Travis Etienne's, your Cam Akers. Those are the guys that if you're going to deviate from wide receivers and elite onesies in the dead zone to potentially take a running back, they have to fit that type of mold.
Yeah, and that's exactly why we're making this video, right? Because it's very easy for, some fantasy channels to just say, well, get 2 running backs in the first 2 rounds because then, you get your studs early and you hammer out wide receivers. But sometimes the board doesn't always fall that way, right? Sometimes you don't get 2 good running backs at value because everybody in your league has the same strategy, get 2 running backs in the first 2 rounds, and you're forced to, draft a wide receiver because he slid. And speaking of drafting wide receivers because they slid, picks 3 and 4 are a completely different strategy that you're going to employ from picks 1 and 2, because at picks 3 and 4, you no longer have access to Jonathan Taylor and Christian McCaffrey unless they somehow fall to you at those picks. But for us, we see a sizable tier break between Jonathan Taylor and Christian McCaffrey and the rest of the top end running backs, whether it's Dalvin Cook or Najee Harris or Austin Eckler or Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, any running back that you like in the first round outside of Jonathan Taylor and Christian McCaffrey, we see a bit of a tier break between those guys. So because of this, we can really execute a couple of strategies from picks 3 and 4. For us, picks 3 and 4 are Justin Jefferson and Cooper Kupp. I have Jefferson at 3, you have him at 4, and then I have Kupp at 4, and you have him at 3. But for the most part, after Justin Jefferson and Cooper Kupp are off the board, we both have another 2 wide receivers after that, Jamar Chase and Devontae Adams, because we have that tier break between those top 2 running backs. So after you draft one of these top wide receivers, which is what we would do if you pick 103 or 104, especially in any kind of PPR format, depending on how the board falls, you can expect to adopt one of a couple different strategies. Number one, you could have one of those running backs fall to you, whether it's a Saquon Barkley, a Javonte Williams, a DeAndre Swift, a Leonard Fournette, and Aaron Jones, whatever running back you like in that area of the draft. And then you can execute a hero RB similar to picks 1 and 2, except you took your anchor wide receiver first and your anchor running back second, rather than the Christian McCaffrey, Jonathan Taylor build. And then in that round 3, 4, 5, 6 area, you're basically executing the same strategy. Or if all those running backs are off the board, you can build out a good zero RB, because if all those running backs go, you're probably going to get access to potentially a CeeDee Lamb, a Mike Evans, a Deebo Samuel, a Tyreek Hill type of wide receiver there. And you might even get 2 of those guys at that 2-3 turn. Or like Danny said in the other part, you could hammer out Travis Kelce or a Mark Andrews at that point.
Yeah, and the biggest disclaimer we want to add to this video for the most part is you'll see a lot of channels, as I said, once those 2 running backs are off the board, you'll see other people have it ranked, Najee Harris, Austin Eckler, Derrick Henry, because their main basis of advice is running backs are scarce. We need to load up on them in the first round. Just from a strict game theory perspective, understanding if everybody's going into the draft with that same mindset, the people that are going to have that inherent edge are the people taking those first 2 picks. Because if we believe personally, McCaffrey and Jonathan Taylor are a tier above every single other running back, if you're just following the trend of taking a running back in the first round, your RB1 slot is going to be inherently less valuable than the players taking at the 1 and 2 picks. And again, you're pushing wide receiver talent, you're pushing tight end talent down the board for those potential monster teams at the 1 and 2 slots to pair 2 of those guys on that 2-3 turn. So instead of just forcing a running back pick because you think, well, he's got a good projection to finish, 17 to 20 PPR points per game. Well, Cooper Kupp has elite difference-making, league-winning potential. Same thing with Justin Jefferson, a difference-making, elite league-winning potential. So passing on that just to fill your running back 1 slot and match your foes picking at that 1 and 2 pick is just going to put you at a disadvantage. You want to have an advantage over those guys. And as good as their RB1s are, they're not going to have their wide receiver 1, their wide receiver 2 even come close to a Jefferson or a Kupp type to start the year. So you're still giving yourself a chance to dominate the flexes and to win your league based off the fact that you have still elite players at their position, even if they aren't the most scarce comparatively.
Yeah, because running backs are scarce. That's a true fact. But we also know that running back fall off is a big deal. Usually, there's a couple really good ones every year. Then once you get to like the RB7, RB8, RB9 type of area of fantasy scoring, it starts to fall off a little bit. So if all this sounded confusing and you have no idea what the hell we're talking about, we are going to take this into practice. Like I said, we're going to do 2 8-round mock drafts. So we're not going to cover late round sleepers in this video. This is more so early round strategy. And I'm going to pick from number 1, and Danny's going to pick from number 4 in the first mock draft. And then we're going to do a mock draft after that from 2 and 3. And we're going to explain our rationale behind all of our picks. And again, try not to focus on exactly what players we're picking, more so the tier breaks in the bucket of players that we're targeting. So if you disagree with me taking, Leonard Fournette at the second round pick, you would have taken Aaron Jones. That's fine. You can adopt the same strategy and just pick a different player. So enough jibber jabber. Let's get right into it. All right, so you guys can see we are now in the draft. You guys can see the scoring settings, PPR mock draft, 1 quarterback, 2 running back, 2 wide receiver, 1 tight end, 2 flex. We figured this was pretty standard. We're, again, doing 8 rounds of this mock draft, so we're not going to cover late round values or sleepers or anything like that. We are just going to hammer out the early round strategy. So I'm going to start the draft here. At 101, as we kind of touched on early on, we have a disagreement at 101. You have McCaffrey, I have Taylor. Again, we're not focused on player versus player takes in this video for the most part, but I have Jonathan Taylor 101. I'm going to go with him. As I mentioned, he's the type of guy that you go into the strategy thinking, I'm going to potentially use him as an anchor running back and a hero RB, and unless something changes, unless a guy falls to me.
For sure. After you do go with Jonathan Taylor, we see Christian McCaffrey and Derrick Henry go off the board in that 2 and 3 slot. And this basically echoes what I was saying going into the draft, where team 3 there, you know that Jonathan Taylor and Christian McCaffrey are off the board. It feels like you're just chasing your RB1 slot. As much as I like Derrick Henry, I think he's a good player, obviously a great running back in real life, but in a full PPR setting, he just doesn't have the ceiling to be able to match some of those guys, I think, going into this upcoming year. Not to mention, of course, the negative red flags with a 28-year-old running back, 250 pounds, coming off a lower body injury last year. So Derrick Henry's a good player, but I'd much rather get my exposure on him in DFS as opposed to season long, committing to him for the full 17 weeks. With that being said, I mentioned it. Don't chase your running back 1 slot. I have Cooper Kupp staring me in the face. He should be, as long as he's healthy, a lock top 3 overall wide receiver with 20 plus PPR point per game upside. Lock that up. Perfectly fine getting him there. And Justin Jefferson does go next. The team 5 made the proper pick.
Yeah, and again, you could have taken Jefferson, you could have taken Kupp. Again, we're not totally focused on micro player takes here. You guys can see, I think this top 10 looks pretty realistic to what a lot of people are going to see. You're going to see in some home leagues Jamar Chase slide because everybody's hammering out running backs. A number of running backs go off the board here. We see, I don't know what, almost 12 running backs off the board in the first 20 picks or so. This is usually what you're going to see in a lot of home leagues, which is why we go into the draft with the mentality that hero RB might be viable.
Yeah, I mean, I was fully prepared if I needed to go with a full 0 RB, but one of my archetypes of running back that I want to target in terms of having the ceiling to be able to justify a high pick falls to me with Saquon Barkley. Saquon Barkley was not on the board here. I would pivot towards a Mark Andrews or one of those wide receivers, but I'm locking in Saquon Barkley. I think realistically, as long as he stays healthy, he should be able to surpass that 20 plus PPR point per game upside that I'm looking for in a running back pick this high.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm on the board here, and I do see a bit of a tier break at running back. So I am, luckily in the position where I can pair my Jonathan Taylor with another great running back and go with the double hero RB strategy, which instead of taking 1 anchor running back, you take 2 anchor running backs. So I'm going to take Leonard Fournette because he is a tier break for me. I have him rated higher than Aaron Jones, higher than Nick Chubb, higher than some of the guys that went ahead of him. And I'm still able to I'm actually going to just go $2 here. I'm going to take Mike Evans as the other pick. And I'm able to now in, rounds 4, round 5, round 6, still hammer out wide receivers. And I have 2 locked and loaded stud running backs on great offenses with big workloads that I think are great players. So ideally, again, you want to get 2 anchor running backs, get your studs early and move on to the next round. Sometimes it doesn't work out. In this case, it did.
For sure. So obviously, after you went with those $2, we do see both tight ends go off the board with Andrews and Pitts. Now I'm here. You got 2 players from your favorite team. Well, I got 1 player from a rival team with the New York Giants. I'm going to go with another rival player with AJ Brown at this 3rd round pick. So overall, so far through 3 rounds, I'm locking up Cooper Kupp, Saquon Barkley, and AJ Brown. You're locking up Jonathan Taylor, Leonard Fournette, and Mike Evans.
Yeah, no doubt. Definitely love that start for you. You get yourself an anchor running back and two great wide receivers. Again, we can see a couple dead zone running backs go off the board: Ezekiel Elliott, James Conner, David Montgomery. But we do see some of those archetypes that we're willing to deviate in the dead zone for, with Cam Akers and ETN go off the board. And that's kind of what I talked about in the kind of prelude to this video, was that ideally you want to get two running backs before round, 4, let's say, because it's a scarce position. But in this case, it doesn't necessarily work out for you. Your best available running back, I'm assuming, is probably like a Breece Hall, Josh Jacobs type. And there's probably much better value at the wide receiver position at this point.
My highest rated wide receiver left is going to be Marquise Brown. Obviously, in a home league, if you see Marquise Brown this listed down, you could potentially play the ADP game knowing that, some of your league mates may not be as in tune, but knowing that Corey is picking on that turn and Marquise Brown is almost assuredly not making it back to me, I'm just going to take the guy I have rated highest here with Marquise Brown, getting him as my third wide receiver and the second Brown on my team.
Yeah, no doubt. Lamar Jackson might have been a guy that I, deviated away from hammering wide receivers for, because I think getting him at the 412, like the 4-5 turn, is great value. None of the elite tight ends are on the board here. We don't have Waller or Kittle on the board, so I'm totally cool just smashing out two wide receivers here. Two guys that I have rated very highly. Looking at the board right now, I believe Allen Robinson is my highest rated wide receiver, so I'm going to grab him. And then I also have Michael Thomas rated quite high, and then DK Metcalf and Jerry Jeudy following him. So I could play the ADP game here with Michael Thomas. I highly, highly doubt he would actually get back to me. So I'm just going to take the guy who I've rated highest, like you said, and take Michael Thomas there at the 5-1.
I respect it. I was really eyeing Jerry Jeudy if he had fallen back here. And I really, really love DK Metcalf here, but I do see a potential opportunity. I'd like some of the wide receivers kind of buried in the ADP right now. So I have the opportunity here to get an elite quarterback advantage and get the stack with Marquise Brown on the Cardinals. So I'm going to go with Kyler Murray here. Lock that down. Quarterback 1, elite 25 plus PPR points per game. Well, PPR, he's quarterback, but point per game type of upside with Kyler Murray as long as he stays healthy.
Yeah, and another thing that I thought, if you guys think this is a great idea for a video, let us know in the comments. But I thought of actually taking Underdog ADP and comparing it to sites like Sleeper and Yahoo and NFL and sites that you guys play on, and finding the biggest values on those specific sites. Because I've noticed Gibson goes quite high on Sleeper, but he doesn't go high on the other sites. I think the other sites have caught up to it. So let me know if you guys think, if you play in a Yahoo league, you'd love to see who the best values on Yahoo are, because that might be a video that we do next week or something like that. So, Danny, you're back on the clock. You got yourself an elite onesie. You got 3 great wide receivers. You have one more that you could start in a 2 flex, 2 wide receiver type of format here.
For sure. I mean, I'm eyeing my board. Obviously, a couple names that, again, I mentioned on the last turn with Marquise Brown, you could potentially play the ADP game on, but knowing Corey is picking on that turn, there's no shot I can allow Elijah Moore to fall past the 609. Already a crazy value in its own right.
Yeah, and I was really hoping Amon-Ra would fall to me there. A couple guys on the board that I really like here. Again, looking at the running back position, I have 2 running backs already. The dead zone is well in effect. We got Miles Sanders and Damian Harris types at the top of the board, so no chance I'm going in that direction. At the tight end position, Dalton Schultz would have been a guy that I would have loved to gotten here. Dallas Goedert, I could definitely go with him as a tight end that I think is also great, but his teammate is actually the guy that I think is a screaming value right now, which Jalen Hurts here. I guess I could double tap both of them and get the stack with those 2 guys, but I am going to grab one more wide receiver because I do actually really like Gabe Davis. At the 7-1, I'm not a huge Davis guy, but at this price, I'm totally cool stomaching a Gabe Davis, breakout. He's my second flex. He's a guy that we're only going to do 8 rounds of this, but I would have some insurance built in on some maybe safer players later on that I could work into my flex, maybe another running back or something like that. But Gabe Davis at the 7-1 there, I will take that value. And again, underdog ADP versus a site like Sleeper, Gabe Davis is typically off the board at the end of the 4th round. And on Sleeper, you can consistently get him in round 7.
Yeah, big value there with Davis. I actually, I've warmed up a good amount to Gabe Davis. If you guys would have watched this past weekend, we were in Buffalo, did a listener league draft. I actually did draft Gabe Davis, I believe, at the beginning of the 6th round. Elijah Moore was off the board, sadly, but yeah, I think Gabe Davis, he hasn't commanded a consistent target share so far in his career, but realistically, operating as that number 2 weapon on the Bills offense, it's undeniable that there is upside in that situation for an offense that we project to be in that, combatant for potentially the best offense in the NFL. So like that pick gives you upside, especially as the 4th wide receiver you take on your team. I'm on the board here. You mentioned Dallas Goedert. That's a very tempting pick for me right now. I'm also eyeing the wide receivers, a couple guys I really like, but ultimately kind of a flat tier that I think I can get a comparable talent to fall back to me. given the aggressiveness, if you will, in terms of how this room has drafted tight end, again, you got to be water. If you notice the room is drafting tight end pretty high, I'm going to get the last guy, I think, in that mid tier 2 of tight end with Dallas Goedert, and I'm going to be happy with that.
Yeah, that's exactly where I would have went with that pick as well. I definitely could have picked him at 7-1. If Gabe Davis and maybe Devontae Smith or some of the other guys had been off the board, I could have went there. You also definitely could have went with an RB2 in a hero RB build, similar to some of the guys that went off the board, like a Tony Pollard type, a Kareem Hunt type. A lot of those guys definitely valid with that pick. And it looks like you started a bit of a tight end run with 3 straight going right before your pick.
Yeah, absolutely love to see that. I'm gonna take a guy that is probably gonna find his way by the start of the season higher up in terms of the ADP. He doesn't really fit. Again, we're outside of the running back dead zone. He doesn't really fit the archetype where you're just taking him on projectable volume. I think this guy's got legitimate upside in terms of potentially working in that receiving game, usurping the current starter on the team as the RB1. Showed a lot of flashes as a rookie. I'm going to take Ramondre Stevenson again, not just to fill out my running back core, because that's ultimately not the goal. You could take a bunch of wide receivers in this range too, but I don't mind mixing in Ramondre Stevenson here. I think he could be a 6th-round pick by the time September rolls around.
I wanted Devontae Smith to fall back to me
That's a good
so
pick too.
bad. That would have been such a great value. I think at wide receiver here, there's a couple guys that I still like. I still like Lockett. I still like Ayuk. They'd be my top 2 guys for sure. At running back, again, I have a double hero start, so I really don't have to force anything at the running back position. I do like some of the guys that are still on the board. Damian Pierce and Rashad Penny, I think, are my highest 2 rated, with Alex Madison pretty close behind those guys. At wide receiver, though, I am going to probably, because the tight end position, I was hoping one of Ertz or Knox or Freiermuth made it back to me, but they did actually go off the board. So I'm just going to go best available player, a guy that I really like. I don't have to fill out, my wide receiver slot, but I do have a bit of a riskier second flex. So what I'm going to do is go with a little bit more of a safer guy, a guy that I think can be really good early on in the season in case Gabe Davis doesn't work out. Tyler Lockett has been, a very good wide receiver for a number of years. I know it's Geno Smith probably starting at quarterback, but he's still going to be able to command targets because he's a good wide receiver, and he's still going to have some big play upside as well. So that is the first of the 2 mock drafts that we're going to do. You guys can see the teams there on the screen. We're not going to go through them totally in depth, but basically, structurally, what we did was I built out a double hero RB with Jonathan Taylor and Leonard Fournette. I was well prepared to go, wide receiver at that turn. I could have went with a Mark Andrews, Mike Evans if I wanted to, but Leonard Fournette to me represented a tier break at the running back position, so I went with him. And then I was able to just hammer out a bunch of wide receivers that I really like, with Evans, with Robinson, with Michael Thomas, with Gabriel Davis and Tyler Lockett, and I was able to deviate for an elite quarterback at a great value at 6'12", Jalen Hurts there.
I'm glad you went through that as well. I'll go quickly through my team. Obviously started off with the hero RB build, Cup, AJ Brown, Marquise Brown, and Elijah Moore, 4 wide receivers in the first 6 rounds, along with an elite onesie, and my anchor running back was Saquon Barkley. Did wrap around Goddard and Ramondre Stevenson to fill out, the final 2 rounds. I will quickly add to, so this is how we would attack the first 4 picks, right? We're light on running back. We choose carefully in terms of the archetype of running back we want to invest in. This is the optimal way to build your running back core, in my opinion. What Team 2 did after already having Christian McCaffrey and forcing, again, as much as I like Brees Hall, there's still potential workload concerns there, but that is the archetype. If I'm going to take one, I'm fine with going towards. But getting both Paul and Dobbins is the problem that I have, because now you're relying upon, again, a 2 wide receiver, 2 flex league. Your wide receiver 3 is going to end up being probably what? I don't even know what's available at this point. I mean, if we're looking at wide receiver 3, you're probably hoping for like round 10, round 11 with Jacoby Myers, fucking guys,
Christian
Kirk, guys in that range. And realistically, again, if you had gone a Jerry Jeudy there instead of a J.K. Dobbins, and maybe even a wide receiver instead of, like, if you got Lockett instead of Singletary, this would be a phenomenal start because you did get your elite onesies with Allen and Andrews covered. But again, in a full PPR, that's not going to suffice for a wide receiver core. And then obviously you see some of the teams mixed into the mid rounds. We'll get into that strategy during this week. But 5 running backs in the first 8 rounds, I don't care what league you're in, that's just not going to suffice.
Yeah, Team 9 just going with the robust RB there, big time.
Yeah.
Did not like that. So let's switch over to the other draft. Like I said, we're going to be drafting from the 2 and 3 spot this time, just kind of going over the basket of players that we're choosing between will probably end up being similar, but for the most part, we do want to outline the difference between, drafting at 2 and 1 and drafting at 3 and 4 and all that kind of stuff. So we're going to head over to that right now. All right, so we're on the board with the second draft. Like I said, Danny is picking from 2. I am picking from 3. I'm going to start the draft here. Danny is going to have Jonathan Taylor go off the board as the first overall pick. You're 102, Christian McCaffrey, like we already talked about in
Locked and
the
loaded.
strategy portion. You get yourself an anchor running back. And again, similar to what I said when I picked Jonathan Taylor 101, at this point in time, your frame of mind should be, okay, hero RB might be the most optimal strategy based on what typically falls to the end of the second round. But again, we want to stay water. If you have a Javonte Williams or something fall to you, I'm sure you will deviate away from a wide receiver at that point in time. So again, as we talked about, picks 3 and 4, we expect those first 2 running backs to go off the board. They do in this scenario, and we go with a Justin Jefferson. Danny went with Cooper Kupp at 4. He would have went with him at 3 if he was picking from 3. I go with Justin Jefferson. He's my wide receiver 1. Again, not necessarily a micro player takes video, but it is worth noting where we have these players ranked. We see a number of running backs still going off the board here. Travis Kelce off the board. Wide receivers are a little bit more heavy here, and we're going to see a huge run of running backs here, I think.
Yeah, and let me just quickly add too. I prefaced it when I was picking at 4, but teams 4, 5, and 6 here, they are chasing the running back 1 slot because realistically, again, you want to make the case for Eckler over Chase. So I'm not gonna I prefer Chase, but I think that's close. But I just can't fathom passing on Cooper Kupp till the 108. So seeing the fact that Team 8 is probably the most Danny start of all time with Kupp and Barkley, they have a comparable advantage in terms of the running back slots between Barkley and versus like Cook, Eckler, and Henry. Only the difference between Kupp and Hill and Debo is much larger. So Team 8's in a very good spot there. Just wanted to point that out. I'll let you get to your pick.
Yeah, no worries. I'm on the board here at running back, and I have 2 guys that I believe are tier 2 running backs with Javonte Williams and Leonard Fournette. They are probably the direction I'm going to go. I just want to highlight that I could go with a Mark Andrews here if I intended to build out a zero RB. If for whatever reason you don't believe in Javonte and Leonard Fournette, you could always definitely go with that and just build out a complete zero RB at that point. But I do love Javonte Williams. To me, he is ranked way ahead of the 210. So I have him at 2. I have him at 203. I believe I took him in our listener league draft, and I'm totally cool with that pick at the 210. So again, from the 103, you really don't know what you're going to get at the back half of the second round. You could be going with a zero RB build if all the running backs fly off the board, like they probably will in most of your guys' home leagues. Or if your home league guys are a little bit more sharper and they know that some of the wide receiver value is more pristine in that area of the draft, then maybe you do have a guy like Javonte Williams that slides to you at the 210.
Yep, and I really like Leonard Fournette here. I also really like the wide receivers, and I like Mark Andrews. So because I have Christian McCaffrey, I'll lean pass catcher for this pick and maybe hope, again, Fournette falls. If not, I still have a nice fallback with another wide receiver or potentially Mark Andrews. So my favorite wide receiver on the board here is going to be Mike Evans. So I'm going to get Mike Evans here. See Keenan Allen and Josh Allen go off the board. The Allen brothers go off the board on that 2-3 turn. So this worked out perfectly for me. I took Evans, gambled that potentially Fournette would fall back to me. Now I create a superhero build between McCaffrey and Fournette on my team. Again, McCaffrey, we know, has 30 PPR point per game type of upside if he's healthy. And Leonard Fournette last year, when he was able to usurp Ronald Jones and get that full workhorse job, presents that league-winning archetype where he was a 22 PPR point per game scorer, getting 6.5 targets per game, and one of the best offenses in the league. So all of the peripherals are there for him. Obviously, again, he's an older running back, so there's some risk there. But in terms of the peripherals, in terms of the efficiency you saw last year, I think that you can make the case of taking Fournette over Cook, and we see Cook go at the 105, Fournette at the 302.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm faced with pretty much a 2-man decision here. A.J. Brown is my highest ranked player overall. Mark Andrews represents a positional advantage here, so I could definitely go with Mark Andrews as well. I'm going to go with A.J. Brown and hope that I have a chance that one of Kittle or Waller falls back to me. I think there's a more likely chance that I like those tight ends at that point in time than some of the wide receivers that'll fall back to me, but it is possible that these guys just fly off the board. And Pitts actually went before Andrews, and Andrews slides to the 308, aka the greatest draft of all time. And he grabs Jalen Waddle on his way back as well. So great job for Team 8, the computer. He's doing the Lord's work right now.
Yeah, the 308's dominating this draft right now. Potentially the wide receiver one, a top 5 running back, and the tight end one, all in the first 3 rounds. And then wrapping that up with potentially this year's Debo with Jalen Waddle. So love that start for Team 8. If you are Team 8, if you can pull off a Team 8 start in your home league, by the way, that you're in a very comfortable spot.
Yeah, and I would be breaking my keyboard in a real draft if Travis Etienne was sniped 1 pick before me on this turn here, because I would love to get a superhero RB start with Javonte Williams and Travis Etienne, and yet still have Justin Jefferson and A.J. Brown to head out my wide receiver core. Unfortunately, Etienne goes off the board, so I have to pivot. DJ Moore actually borderline a tier break at this point in time. for the wide receiver position. Just got announced today that Baker Mayfield will indeed be the starter. I definitely love to see that. The Panthers quarterbacks haven't exceeded like 17 passing touchdowns in like 3 or 4 seasons that DJ Moore has been there. Baker Mayfield's got a couple seasons of, 25, 28 touchdowns in his career. I think he can definitely up the floor and ceiling of DJ Moore. So I'm going to grab him at the 410. And I like how I've built out my wide receiver core so far. You might be, again, if you don't like Javonte Williams, this team will scare you. But I love Javonte Williams. So I'm totally cool with having him as my hero RB, anchor RB, whatever you want to call it. But you could have just as easily taken Leonard Fournette, and I wouldn't have batted an eye.
Yep. No, I agree with you there. I mentioned too, my highest rated wide receiver in last draft is Marquise Brown. I hate to take the same player 2 drafts in a row, but getting him here at the 411 is just an absolute steal. We do see Breece Hall and Mike Williams go on the turn. So overall, I got 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, very much in love with the upside I have on my team. Going to get another wide receiver here. It's between Allen Robinson, Jerry Jeudy, in particular. You went with Allen Robinson last time, so I'm going to spice it up for us and go with Jerry Jeudy here. So if you want to go Allen Robinson again, go ahead.
Yeah, he is. He's well above the rest of
Yep.
these guys for me. So I'm going to go with Allen Robinson. And again, in a 2 wide receiver, 2 flex PPR league, to me, the optimal play in terms of anti-fragility, in terms of the guys that you're going to know, week in and week out, the safest projections is to fill out your your flex spots with wide receivers, especially in this area of the draft where running backs are not ideal. And if you want to deviate for a tight end or quarterback, that definitely makes sense. But I am going to have my anchor RB in Javonte Williams and have 2 studs, Justin Jefferson and AJ Brown, to lock down my top 2 wide receiver spots. And my flexes are probably going to be more advantageous than, for example, the guy that took Antonio Gibson at the 4-8 and now has to start, Amon-Ra St. Brown in his flex. I like Amon-Ra St. Brown, but he's not nearly the ease of projection that DJ Moore and Allen Robinson are.
Yep, agreed. I think you're smashing your draft right now. Quick reminder: don't be like Team 6, but I'll let you make your pick.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to take the exact same players that I took last time, but Michael Thomas to me should
Yeah.
not be on the board. So I'm going to take Michael Thomas. Again, you might be like, well, why'd you take another wide receiver if you already have 2 wide receivers and 2 flexes? Injuries happen, bye weeks happen, busts happen, and I'm going to just take the best player available. There's no running backs that belong to go in this area of the draft. I suppose maybe if you're in like a 6 point per passing touchdown league or something, you go with a Brady or you go with a Prescott at this point in the draft. To me, it's just a little bit too early. I also think maybe I know you're picking right after me, so probably not, but there is also a chance that Dallas Goedert falls back to me. That would have been the only other guy in consideration for me outside of Michael Thomas there.
Yep. I went Elijah Moore, by the way, last draft. I'm going to get Rashad Bateman this one. See what falls back. Dallas Goedert actually goes on the turn. So team 1 was just not letting you get your Dallas Goedert share. Now you're at a decision here in my spot where I do like the quarterbacks left on the board, but I think realistically between Ross, Brady, Prescott, Stafford, Lance, etc., pick your poison. I think it's kind of a flat tier, and there's a likely chance one of them falls back at the 8-11. So instead, I'm going to be gearing towards or back towards the wide receiver position because, again, we're in the midst of the running back dead zone where we're eyeing Sanders, Harris. I like Kareem Hunt, but probably not in the 7th round, more so in the 8th or 9th round area. So I'm going back to wide receiver. I see Elijah Moore on the board. It's tough to pass him at any point, but especially in the 7th round.
Yeah, really, really unfortunate that Goddard went because it's not like I can just pivot to running back or pivot to quarterback easily. I am going to take a quarterback and I'm going to take Tom Brady, but I would have much rather had Dallas Goedert there and then whatever fell to me at 8-10. Maybe it was Prescott, maybe it was Stafford, maybe it was Lance, whatever the case is. I like Brady enough to take him at 7-3, but I do wish I was able to instead just take Dallas Goedert and let everything see what falls there. And we still see a number of, relatively questionable running backs going off the board. I'm back on the board here at the 8-10. Pat Freiermuth would be my highest rated tight end at this point in time. At running back, I think is the direction I'm going to go because I don't really love taking Pat Freiermuth here. Plus, if we were going more than 8 rounds, I think I could get him on the way back knowing that Goddard already went here. And maybe you would take Freiermuth, but I'm willing to risk that at this point in time. So I'm going to take, and again, we don't want to take the exact same players. So I'm going to, I would probably take Ramondre Stevenson here because he is my highest rated running back, but I have Dameon Pierce closely ranked with him. So just for differentiation's sake, I'm going to take Dameon Pierce here.
I dig it. And by the way, for the record, I made the bet that potentially a quarterback felt back to me when I made the 702 Elijah Moore pick. And it worked out perfectly for me because the guy that I actually have highest in my rankings right now is the guy who made it back to me, Trey Lance. With Trey Lance, you're maybe in your home leagues, he might fall a little bit because of the uncertainty, because he's young, because of the people worried about, well, can he acclimate to the NFL? But we see this archetype every year where young, big arm, mobile quarterback ends up breaking fantasy football. And on Underdog Fantasy, he's actually the quarterback 7 off the board. But in more home leagues, I can see him being, the quarterback 12, quarterback 13, because people would rather, take the safety of Aaron Rodgers because they know he's really good in real life, or, Dak Prescott, Russell Wilson. But for me personally, especially in 4-point passing touchdown leagues, I'm taking all the Trey Lance possible. And now I have, again, I didn't select him at the position that a elite onesie would be, but I view Trey Lance as that elite onesie, and getting that at the 8-11 with the wide receiver core that I built out with the upside at running back that I have on this team. I'm in love with how I structured at the 102 slot here.
Yeah, exactly. So again, structurally, you guys can see our teams. Danny built out a superhero RB similar to what I did at the first slot. I built out a hero RB, and then I'm starting to, start to hammer out those running backs. Hopefully, a Ramondre falls back to me, or maybe I just go with a tight end or something like that. You might be looking at this draft and be like, that's way too many wide receivers. You should have taken a running back where you took Michael Thomas. Again, that's not what we're aiming for. We're aiming for the best available players. And in the running back dead zone, we know the hit rates are sparse, and we know that Michael Thomas at his ceiling is much higher than, the running back Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Actually, he wasn't even on the board. To Kenneth Walker and Damian Harris and the guys that went off the board, Miles Sanders. Give me Michael Thomas and the guy that literally was the wide receiver 1 overall in PPR scoring 3 years ago. Over some of those questionable running backs. I can fill out late round dart throws on running backs. And again, we're not going to talk about any late round players in these mock drafts because they're just 8 rounds, but we will have you covered for the archetypes that you want to be aiming for in the late rounds. Usually those young wide receivers, rookie wide receivers, and second-year wide receivers, running backs in ambiguous backfields, running backs who are handcuffs, who have high upside if anything happens to the starters. Those are the type of guys you want to line your bench with in a hero RB or a zero RB type of build.
Last disclaimer I'll quickly make too is people are probably wondering, well, if you have so many wide receivers, you kind of mentioned it a little bit, but if you have so many wide receivers, like why wouldn't you just take a running back and fill out your running back slot? Or why are you taking bench players instead of just filling out your RB2? Well, if we're picking running back archetypes, again, in terms of archetype, we want ceiling. We're not just going to take a running back because we expect their workload to be good, because we expect them to, be the RB 13 to 18 on the season. Like realistically, again, some people might argue when I pick Jerry Jeudy, well, why didn't you take, Elijah Mitchell? If I hit on a Ramondre Stevenson or Connor from last year, or Leonard Fournette last year, or any other, round 9, round 10 plus running backs in that range, the opportunity cost of taking Mitchell over one of these elite wide receiver breakouts versus, James Conner over, as I kind of mentioned some of the names earlier, like Jacoby Myers is of this year, or, Christian Kirks, or guys in that range, like you're going to hold upside at both the wide receiver slot and the running back slot while still having, adequate production to fill out your RB2, which instead of selecting one in the 5th round, you got that player in the double-digit rounds where, I mean, realistically, what's the difference in the projection between Ramondre Stevenson and Elijah Mitchell?
Not a huge difference. In fact, I have Ramondre ranked straight up over Elijah Mitchell, and you can get him far later in the draft. And also at wide receiver, it is much harder to find breakout candidates on the waiver wire than it is to piece together 2 or 3 weeks of RB2 production on the waiver wire, like we saw from guys like Sony Michel last year, Rashad Penny, who ended up being a league winner, Darrell Williams, Devontae Booker, in the absence of their starters. There's always going to be guys like that on the waiver wire. So if you're going to be weak at any position, it should be RB2, which is why we have these strategies laid out. And again, we went in depth on these in the hero RB videos, in the zero RB videos. So if you guys want further, clarification on what type of archetypes we're going after, those videos will be linked in the description. You can check those out. But these are basically the strategies that we are going to employ from picks 1 to 4 of these drafts. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you guys got a lot of value from it. If you did, hit the like button, comment any of your thoughts down below, and subscribe to the channel if you are new. As we talked about while we were in Buffalo, we're also running a special giveaway for those of you guys that have not yet taken the plunge and checked out underdogfantasy.com. Underdog Fantasy, when you use the promo code FSE, you'll get 100% back on whatever you put in. You'll also get our Dynasty and our redraft rankings for free as a thank you for doing that. And all you have to put in is like $10. So if you just put in $10 using our promo code, you'll get our rankings for free. And on top of that, this giveaway that we're running from now, August 20th and August 27th, is anybody who deposits within that time frame is going to be entered into a giveaway of winning one of 5 $50 credits on the site. So you could put in $10 on Underdog, get 20 using our promo code, get our rankings for free, and also get an additional 50 if you win the giveaway. And we're not a huge channel, right? So 1 of 5, that's pretty decent odds for you, given the amount of people that typically sign up on Underdog Fantasy. You guys have a pretty good chance of winning that. So if you haven't, if you're interested in that, the links will be in the description. They'll also be linked down below in the pinned comment as well. All the details listed there. But with that being said, peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.